And that concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein, and we're here on another beautiful sunny day in Jerusalem on our rooftop studio. My guest today is Nitsana Darshan-Leitner from the Shurat HaDin Israel Law Center. Nitsana, thank you for coming on the show.
So thank you very much for being here.
Nitsana, tell our viewers a little about what is Shurat HaDin Israel Law Center.
Shurat HaDin is a civil rights organization based in Israel, which along with international attorneys fights on behalf of the State of Israel, fights terror organizations utilizing the legal system. We have represented over hundreds of terror victims in lawsuits and legal actions against terror organizations, against state-sponsored terrorism like Iran, Syria, North Korea, organizations like PLO, Hezbollah, Hamas, and banks that are providing financial services to terror organizations. UBS, Bank of China, Lebanese Canadian Bank. We are taking the battle on behalf of the Israeli state into the courtrooms.
Nitsana, it seems to me that there are two laws. There's a law for every other country in the world, and then there's a law from Israel. Why is there different laws for Israel in the international court than there is for other countries?
Well, it very much depends where you are sitting, existing, and operating. In Israel, there is one law. In democratic states, there is one law. In countries which are biased, unfortunately, there are two approaches to Israel, but in the end of the day, there is one law, meaning that if we want to sue a terror organization or a state-sponsored terrorism, in Israel, we'll get justice. In the United States, we'll get justice. Canada, even sometimes Western European countries. In other countries, nothing you can do. We won't get justice. And I think the root of this situation is very basic. There is anti-Semitism in the world, and some tribunals treat the Jews as in Middle Ages. These are the Jews. They never appeared in court, they should not get their day in court, and therefore they should not get any justice.
We see in Europe a lot of times that they try to take Israeli politicians, heads of our armies, and bring them to court. It's absolutely ridiculous. This is a democratic state, this is a defensive army, and they are accusing them of war crimes against terrorist organizations. How is that even possible legally?
You're absolutely right. Absolutely right. What they do is charging IDF soldiers for war crimes for something that the soldiers did to protect the life of the Israelis, of the Jews who are living in the Jewish state. And there is absolutely no war crimes on doing it. The Israeli Supreme Court scrutinizes every attack that comes before them. They make sure that the IDF is working legally, obeying the law. But what can you do when Israel enemies realize that they cannot beat Israel militarily? They decided to use a different weapon, and unfortunately it's a very devastating weapon. It's called lawfare, and they are going from tribunal to tribunal around the world and trying to indict IDF soldiers, officers, leaders from Israel for war crimes. And so far they haven't been successful. However, if they go, for instance, to the International Criminal Court, which has a tendency to get involved in a conflict in the Middle East, there is a huge risk that they are going to succeed. In this case, we are trying to prevent them. We have a successful step we took in the court in Spain, and we realized that the best way to protect the IDF soldiers is actually to plan a preemptive attack, meaning we go to the court and we say, if you want to deal with our soldiers, you'll have to deal with other people that you may want to protect. So When the IDF soldiers had an arrest warrant against them in the court in Spain, we launched a lawsuit against a Spanish figure. It was a former Prime Minister of Spain, Javier Solana, who was the head of NATO forces in the Kosovo War. And during the Kosovo War, the NATO forces dropped bombs from high altitude towards the targets, and one of them fell on a children's hospital. That's a war crime. The moment we tried to launch this complaint in the Spanish court, Spain immediately changed the law and dropped the complaint against the IDF soldiers. So this is the only way to fight these biased laws in courts.
Nitsana, you've had incredible success in America with landmark cases getting compensation for American citizens who were attacked during the Second Intifada, killed, maimed. How are you able to not just get the victory, but actually enforce the verdict?
Look, obviously, the people that we win cases against them don't come and pay the judgment. They sometimes even don't show up to court. However, we go and collect our judgment against assets that are held in third parties' hands, meaning bank accounts that belong to these countries, real estate that belong to these countries. We were able to seize the frozen bank account that belonged to Iran. We were able to get a house that belonged to the son of the Shah, that became an Iranian government property after the Islamic Revolution, and we confiscated it. We go after artifact collection that belonged to Iran. We go after North Korean assets and obviously Palestinian bank accounts. Everywhere these lawless regimes have assets around the lawful world, we can go after them and collect them.
Nitsana, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
Well, that Israel has a right to its land. The Torah gave us this land, God gave us this land, and we have the assurances that this land belongs to us. However, we cannot stop fighting for this land, and the whole world should join us on this fight. The Torah taught us, "Lo ta'amod al dam re'echa." Don't stand idly by your brother's blood. We will not stand idly by our brother's blood. We will keep fighting the terror organization. We'll keep fighting terror organizations in court because we don't have any other choice. We live in Israel. We want to continue living here. We want to ride our buses. We want to shop our malls. We want to sit in our cafes. We want to send our kids to school and make sure they're coming safe home. And everyone should join us in this fight.
Thank you, Nitsana, for coming on the show. And thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.